Hello everybody, how are you all? So I've got Elvira with me today, and Elle practices NLP, and I have to say she's very good at it. And, from personal experience, hello Elvira.
Hey Debbie, it's lovely to hear your voice. Thank you so much for the invitation today. It's brilliant.
You're very welcome. And first of all, let's find out what's going on in the chat box and who's with us today. So we've got Summon S. Hi Summon, how are you today? Lee, apparently you've come here for the wonderful advice. Are we in the right place? Lee, what's happening? I'm very flattered. Thank you, Lee. Janice, good morning to you, but it's now afternoon, so you need to change that and come back to me in the chat box and say good afternoon. Yoda. Yeah, is that really you, Yoda?
Oh, that's a real Yoda.
Well, maybe.
Oh,
and
cool.
A few years ago, my HR job title was called Poda, and I have to say I was called Yoda the Poda for a while, which was not particularly useful. Anyway, of course, I want you to put lots of questions in there for Elle about NLP if you've got any today. And Sovereign, I'm sorry I missed you there. And Alan, yeah, I know, echo. Hopefully it's gone now. And it threw me too, as you could hear at the beginning. So anyway, Elle, how are you today? Are you enjoying the sunshine, Elle?
Coming from South Africa, when the sun shines out, Ellie's happy, It's just one of those things. It doesn't take much.
Doesn't the sunshine, though, make everybody happy? It just changes everybody's behaviour, I find.
Yeah, totally.
So now, give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you became an NLP practitioner.
It's a long story, so I am going to summarize. It's 17 years worth of information. It needs to be shorter than that. I lost my husband when I was very young. He died and through committing suicide, and it changed my life. So at that moment, I realized that what I had been doing and the things that I had been thinking had to shift. And I searched. I wanted to understand what had happened. I wanted to understand why it had happened. I wanted to in some way release myself from the feelings of guilt and anger and sadness that I had experienced through that process of him dying, and things like, the stuff that was really important to me, they suddenly became less important. So the church, we were very religious. My mom's a Roman Catholic, so we were brought up as Catholics. They turned their back on me because he died through committing suicide, and they treat that as a mortal sin. So they don't recognize that as a proper death. I don't know what the word proper means, but they wouldn't bury him. So I turned my back on the church. My family was confused and distressed, so they weren't really there for me either because they were dealing with their own pain and grief. And I had to find a way of getting through this mire that I had found myself in, and started to look into alternative thinking, alternative ways of living, alternative ways of healing. Entered into an incredible growth experience, looking at things like Buddhism and Taoism and reflexology and Reiki and energy healing and auric healing and Sufism and all sorts of things, which brought me to this country. So I left South Africa in 1999. I came to England. And while I was here, NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, kept following me around. And I know that sounds really strange, but everywhere I turned, I would see NLP courses, people talking about it, friends recommending it to me. And eventually, after 2.5 years, I resisted it for 2.5 years. And after 2.5 years, I thought, okay, I got the message. I need to go and do the course. And I elected to train with Opal Training and did my practitioner training course, and that fundamentally changed my life. In that moment, I discovered the tools and techniques that I could then use to help myself, to help heal the huge amount of distress that I had been carrying around with me because of the experiences that I'd had. And it literally turned my life into what it is today. And Debbie, I can't explain to you how magical that was for me. because everything that I've ever wanted has become a reality. I don't have a wish list anymore. There's nothing on it. And I wanted a family. I wanted a close, rewarding, fruitful, healthy relationship. I wanted the opportunity to be able to share my knowledge and skills. I wanted a phenomenal house that had space and a lovely garden, and I've got it. I've got all of it. And I fundamentally believe that had I not experienced those changes, I would not be where I am today. And I am eternally grateful for, the fact that my husband had done what he did. Because had he not done what he did, I wouldn't be where I am today. So there is a real part of me that is really, really grateful for the fact that that was a gift. And I know that sounds and could sound really weird to some people, but that experience assisted me to become who I am today. And I can only be but grateful.
I think it's really interesting with a number of practitioners that I meet like yourself, because many of them say that they've had an experience or a life experience that's led them to then take on the practice and practice of therapy because they've experienced it truly themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you don't go through that yourself, I think there's something that's missing. I think there's a level of compassion and maybe a level of empathy or a level of understanding of other people's trials and tribulations. And I think when you go through that yourself, that understanding of it's never full understanding, but it's a limited level of understanding, but it's still understanding potentially where that person is and what they're going through makes you a better therapist. It facilitates the process because you can then step into, in a small way, that person's model of their reality and then facilitate that process for them so that they can then discover what is really true to them and what will help them to move forward.
And I do think that, that absolute empathy that you can have with someone who is in a place where they can't see options or possibilities, in effect, really can truly change things for them because they can see that you understand them.
Yeah, exactly. And also there is a level of trust that comes from that. It's that they recognize that you've been through it and you've succeeded, and that shows them that there's a possibility for them to do the same. So that creates trust, and when they create that environment where they trust you and they trust themselves, and they know that they can change and shift and get to a place where it's more fruitful and healthier for them, that facilitates the process.
Now let's get on to what is NLP, because I'm already getting questions from Sovereign and Lee about, Lee's saying can't really condone NLP, to be honest, and sounds like religion to me with sovereignty. Now, I understand where you're coming from, guys, and this is why I asked Elvira to come on today, because there are sides to NLP which hopefully Elvira will talk about, and if not, I will cover off, because I knew you'd talk about it in the chat box. So Elvira, let's just start with, what is NLP?
Okay, so NLP, it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So if we just split that up very quickly, neuro is neurological. So in fact, it's the way in which the synapses in the brain function and how they connect. So if you think of the pathways, the neurological pathways in the brain as a road, as a set of roads and a map, things are then triggered in our environment around us and within us that triggers a journey down a particular road. And that road is formed and you've been down it before, and there's a sequence of events that you follow. So that's one part of neuro-linguistic programming, is the fact that we have these neurological pathways which are then triggered and which we then choose to go down. We take our car and we drive down that road, and it's a road that we drive down on a regular basis, so we're very familiar with it. And the second part of neuro-linguistic programming is the word linguistic, and linguistic is about language. It's about using words. And it's about using words to simply shift the pathways that individuals take. It's about using language to allow them to recognize that they can create a different road to travel down, a road that is much, much more rewarding for them. So I am making a huge assumption here that the roads that we have are sometimes, some of them, very, very ineffective. And what we do as therapists, and NLP therapists, is we give people alternative roads. We show them that there's an alternative pathway. We direct them down that pathway so that they can then experience it. And once they've experienced it, they can then choose to go down that pathway more regularly. So that in fact, what that new pathway has given them is an opportunity to create a different result. A result that is far healthier for them. And that's where we come into the word programming, because it simply means that if you have an alternative pathway and then you program yourself to take that path on a regular basis, it then becomes a habit. Anything that we do on a regular basis becomes a habit. It becomes automated. And in fact, after a little while, you no longer even recognize that you've got the old pathway. You simply go down the new road. And the new road gives you the results that you want. The new road gives you the opportunities that you're looking for, the results that you choose and believe that you deserve. So NLP was created and developed around about 40 years ago, the early 1970s, late 1960s. And it was put together by two individuals, Bandler and Grinder. And what they did is they simply studied successful therapists. They simply studied people in the industry that were working with others and getting successful results. And the reason they did that is because they believed that if they didn't study them and write down, put down on paper what these people were doing, that knowledge would be lost forever. So it's kind of like watching a master chef who's preparing a meal and someone else sitting there and writing down the recipe so that that recipe could be printed or put onto the internet, and other people who follow that recipe would get a similar result. That really is what they did. And it's been ongoing. It's been continual. The therapists that they studied in the early 1970s were Milton Erickson, who's the father of hypnotherapy, Virginia Satir, who is the family therapist. She's no longer around. And Fritz Perls, who studied and worked through Gestalt, which is the way in which we store memories and how we access memories in the brain and how that then triggers emotions in the body. So what they did was they put those models down. They created the recipes, which are then taught. And if you follow those recipes, you will get results as therapists. And the disciplines that they then subsequently studied have been many. So the whole proponent of NLP is based on the fact that modeling people who are successful and creating the recipe that creates that success allows us to then replicate that so that other people can then experience the same success.
Interesting. So effectively, it can be quite a powerful tool in that respect, can't it?
Debbie, are you there?
I am, yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, basically, it can be quite a powerful tool because of that aspect.
Absolutely. It's incredibly powerful, but, and it's a very big but, it's not even an and, it's a but. We can't, as therapists, change anything for anyone until they allow us to. So they have to be willing to make the changes. And I often talk to my clients. I describe myself as a facilitator. I cannot enforce the changes. I cannot direct them down that new pathway until they decide to take the steps. So I often talk to them about us going on a journey together. And I've got the roadmap, I've got a torch, I've got a couple of sandwiches in the bag and some water. And they will then decide whether they want to come on the journey with me or not. But it's their decision because I can't carry them. I cannot drag them kicking and screaming. I can't put them over my shoulder and drag them down that new road. They're going to have to want to come with me. And if they choose not to come, that's absolutely fine. Because some people are just not ready to do that. And that's also okay. They have their own journey. And some people who are ready because they choose, because they want to do something different. They want to have different results. Then make that journey with me. And the results that we get are phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. But I cannot work with anyone who doesn't want to do that, who's chosen not to do that with me.
And that, for me, that's quite an important point, because in the chat box, and I know a few of you, like Lee, have said about the programming element of NLP. And the reason it's called programming, is it's a programming tool. Do you want to just come in on that a little bit, about that aspect of it? Because I know that people do see it sometimes quite negatively in the way it can be used, and has historically in some respects been used.
Yeah, absolutely. NLP is often referred to as a complete manipulative tool, and people recognize it as that. And yes, absolutely, it's a manipulative tool. And I will manipulate in any way that I possibly can once my client has given me permission to manipulate that environment for that client so that they can see a different perspective. I will do whatever it takes because that's my job. And they've given me permission. They've told me that they no longer want what they've got, and they want something different. They want to shift from where they are. They want to let go of the negative emotions that they're carrying around with them, the anger, the guilt, the fear, the sadness. They want to let go of belief systems that don't work for them anymore. Things like I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm incompetent, I'm a failure, I'm never going to be good enough, I'm not wanted, I'm not loved. Once they give me permission, because they've told me then they no longer want that. They no longer want those beliefs. They no longer want that reality. They no longer want those results. I will do whatever it takes, Debbie, because that's the skill of the therapist, is to help that individual to shift. And yes, that is absolute manipulation. But let's be real here. We manipulate every day. The air that we breathe in is manipulated by the body so that it creates oxygen in the bloodstream and releases the carbon dioxide. That's manipulation in itself. We eat food that we manipulate. We put it in our stomachs, it churns away, we extract the nutrients and the minerals from it, and we expel the waste. That's manipulation. Everything that we do in our daily activity has an element of manipulation in it. We're always in the process of taking what we've got and shifting it and changing it into something else. So, yeah, absolutely. But the one thing that people forget is that every individual is incredibly intelligent, has huge amounts of wisdom, and is in charge and in control of what happens to them. And they can choose. Because if they say no, then it can't happen. End of. It cannot happen. The brain and the body will not let it happen. No one can force anyone to do anything unless they give it some element of permission.
And that's what's different in some respects about when we're using it in a therapy situation, in regards to that when someone turns up and we take them through these models, effectively they've given us permission to do that because they are looking for us to help them to see a different outcome at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Spot on, Debbie. I often say to my clients when they come into my room, 70% of the work is already done because they've already made that choice that what they've got isn't what they want. So 70% of the work is already done. Yeah.
So can you basically talk about the timeline process? Because that's one of the processes that you actually use, isn't it? Can you actually explain that? Because I actually find it quite interesting.
Yeah, so timeline comes from Fritz Perls. It comes from Gestalt therapy. It's a very, very old psychological process, and what it does is it allows us to release negative emotions, and there are 4 of them. They are layered. They literally sit one on top of the other. If the first emotion that we will experience when we are distressed or traumatized is anger. And the second emotion, once the anger is released, is sadness. The third emotion that we would experience once the sadness is released is fear. And then the fourth one is guilt. And neurologically, that's how they stacked. So they stacked in that order: anger, sadness, then fear, and then guilt. So if we go through bereavement, for example, we will experience huge amounts of anger. Why did they leave me? Why did they go? Why didn't they look after themselves? Etc., etc. Once the anger is dissipated and is released, then we get the sadness. We get the upsettedness about them going. I miss them. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel upset that they're gone. Once that's released, then the fear comes up, which is, what am I going to do now that they're gone? Who's going to look after me? What's going to happen to me? Where am I going to go? And then the last one, once the fear is released, is the feeling of guilt. The guilt is the last one in the layer, and it looks something like, if only I had, or if only I hadn't. It's that sense of regret that maybe you could have or should have done something different, or you could have done more, you could have done less, or you couldn't. You should have said something, you didn't say it, or you said something that you shouldn't have said, or whatever that regret is. And then once the regret is removed, then we're free. We're free from that process. And then we come to a place of acceptance, and we move on. And what timeline release does is it assists the individual to release those negative emotions in whatever trauma they've experienced, whatever distress that they've experienced, that they've stored. So it works on information that's been stored in the brain through a set of experiences that individual has had. And it allows us as therapists to take them back to that time in the past where that first event occurred, so that we can then reframe and release that negative emotion. And emotions are stored in the body. They are energy, and the energy is stored in the body. And when we release that energy, that individual then moves towards a much healthier state mentally and emotionally. So if we walk around carrying huge amounts of anger, for example, around with us because it hasn't been released yet, our behavior comes from an angry place because it's stored in the body. The energy is there. So how we see the world and how we see the people around us, and even to a very large extent how we see ourselves, is tainted with anger. So we operate from an angry place. And when we operate from an angry place, we get certain results. People respond to us in a certain way. We get certain information back from the world around us. If we no longer respond from a place of anger, let's for example say that we are now shifting and the anger is no longer there, and we no longer operate from a place of anger, so we come from a place of perhaps compassion, or perhaps a place of sensitivity, or a place of acceptance, or a place of recognition, then the results that we then get from those around us will be different. We get a different response. Anybody that's been in any situation where someone has come from a place of acceptance and compassion will know full well that it's a very, very different response to if somebody's coming from a place of anger. So what then happens with timeline release is that when those negative emotions are released from that individual, when that person lets it go, they then operate from a place of neutrality. And the results that they get are very, very different. And when they get those different results, life just seems different. It's easier. It's just, it's happier. It's more fulfilled. It's more satisfying.
And I've experienced this with you myself. I had some sessions, and I know that from people who I'd seen one day, and then I saw you, and then the next day, they just said I was a completely different person. In fact, they commented on it quite openly in regards to what happened in between those kind of 2 days. And in all honesty, I really don't know. I'm really not that clear what you did with me, but it very much made me into someone who was finding it difficult to speak in groups to someone who you couldn't shut up speaking in groups. Poor bitching Bob couldn't get a word in edgeways this morning when he was trying to sort out my hosting. So it's absolutely fascinating the way it works.
Yeah, it is the one thing that really changed for me, because I had been carrying huge amounts of anger, sadness, guilt, fear around my husband's suicide. And when I let that go, that's when things began I felt free. I can't explain it any other way. I felt free. I felt that something had been released. I felt a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The sense of heaviness in my chest and my stomach had gone away. It was just like something had just been released. I'd stepped away from something that was holding me down and keeping me weighted into something that was free. And then the world responded differently, so I found my man, in 2 weeks we were like in love. I mean, how's that possible? Can you explain that to me? 2 weeks?
Oh, he's lovely. Who wouldn't fall in love with him? But anyway, that's a completely different show. So let's just talk about how people limit themselves through their belief systems.
Okay.
And how your beliefs alter your behaviour. So, because you've started touching on that, I'm going to hand that over to you and just expand on that for us.
Okay. Debs, just before we go on, were there any questions from anybody about those negative emotions? Just so before I move on to the limiting beliefs.
Well, Lee was talking about manipulation through the programming, basically, but and it being deliberate. And I know where Lee's coming from, and NLP has been used, and because of the language element of it, and you know this, Elle, and from the way I was trained with it, you can use NLP to be very manipulative, as you've covered, and it's used in advertising, it's used in sales. It's used on the television all the time in regards to programming, the programming element of it. But that's not what I'm covering today. What I'm covering is, with yourself, and what I really want to kind of outline is that we use it in therapy in a very different way because we've gained permission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's key.
And and therefore people have come, and like you say, 70% of the work is already done before they actually, you actually sit down with them, because of the decision that they've made to sit down with you, because they truly want to actually have a different world happening around them, and a different health or life or mind, because because they're not getting the results that they want for a variety of reasons. And when they sit in front of someone like yourself, in effect, it's because they do not know how to gain that on their own, and you've got the tool to help them get there. So I think it was someone else who basically said, it can be used negatively or positively, and it's the intent that's behind it.
That's right. Perfectly right. Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. Great. So, in answer to your question about limiting beliefs, limiting beliefs are, as I've mentioned already, they are things that we believe about ourselves that limit us. So, limiting beliefs that limit us. Now, we have beliefs that are fruitful, that are not limiting, and we have beliefs that are limiting. So, for example, if we grow up with an idea or the belief that we are stupid, then we tend to find ourselves in situations that make us feel stupid. Simple as that. Because the thoughts that we have will invite the same thoughts and the same events again and again and again. So let me explain that slightly differently. If I went to school and I recognized and realized I wasn't the brightest smarty in the box, and everybody else was cleverer than I was, then I might come to the conclusion that I'm stupid. Irrespective of the fact that maybe, just maybe, the teachers that I had didn't know how to teach me. Okay? Just maybe. But if we put that to one side and just presume that I now decided that I was stupid, I may then grow up and I may then encounter a situation at work where I will then recognize myself as being stupid. So my colleagues are cleverer than I am. And perhaps I'll say things in a meeting that make me look foolish. And I will then once again feel stupid. Perhaps I may even meet my relationship partner, and he or she makes me feel stupid because maybe he or she is more intelligent than I am. And I then come to the conclusion that I'm stupid. So we pick up a belief when we are really, really young. the beliefs that we have about ourselves are created, wait for it, before the age of 7, Debbie. Before the age of 7, we go and make these beliefs, and we then enforce them by putting ourselves into situations that reinforce those belief systems. So if we grow up with a feeling of, I'm stupid, we will have that belief running through us, and we will encounter situations again and again and again that make us feel stupid. And in that moment, we're not living our full potential. If we then let that belief go, if we work together and we realize that actually those teachers at that school that you went to just didn't know how to teach you, because some of us learn in the way that is easy for us. Some of us learn through visuals, so seeing something. Some of us learn auditorily, hearing something. And some of us actually learn through the feelings in the body, through doing stuff. And most schools don't do the doing. They do the visual, they do the auditory, but they don't do the doing. So take maths, for example. We taught maths at a very, very visual and auditory level, but we never ever put it into practice. So vectors and sines and cosines and things like that, and they're not taught to us in a way which is practical. And if we're one of those people that learns through doing, that will always be a really difficult subject for us because it's never taught in a way that can be put into practice. So when we then learn that we are not stupid, that actually we just learn in a different way, suddenly the whole world is different. Because then we don't go into meetings, we don't enter into jobs, we don't create situations, we don't walk into a relationship where we feel stupid anymore. We just know that we learn differently. And that changes our attitude, it changes the way that we interact with those people, it gives us a sense of confidence, it makes us feel better about ourselves, we believe more about who we are, and we can go out there and really get the things that we really want. So, I don't know if that's answered it.
It's a really interesting point for me because I worked in prison for a short period of time, many, many years ago as an artist, as an art teacher. And I had gone in with the assumption that the lads in there who were all between 16 and 18, they're on the remand, basically were stupid. And I was taught pretty swiftly, actually, and very, very quickly, in fact, how they weren't stupid in the slightest. They had amazing skills, but the education system hadn't actually treated them particularly well in regards to educating them. And, it very much schools. The education system for me schools in one way, but it doesn't truly educate. It doesn't take information and make it accessible to those lads who basically had become very good because they've been bored and they thought, actually, I want to learn something else. So they become very good at breaking in and, picking locks and nicking stuff. And, and that's exactly what you're saying. It's doing. And because in their lessons, they really were bored at looking at a board. And I realised quite quickly that I do have a funny story about working in prison, actually. I had to keep them constantly working through the different ways of learning to keep them occupied, to keep their minds occupied, because they were highly intelligent at doing, And I'll tell the funny story for the radio. When I took over from another art teacher, and about 3 days in, they said to me, do you know what happened to the last art teacher, miss? And this was as I was about to go into the art cupboard, and of course all the keys are on you and you have to be aware of where everybody is and all this business. And I said, I turned around and said, I don't know. And they said, we locked him in the art cupboard. I've never locked a door so quickly, I'll be honest, guys. Because I've no doubt that they were going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You may not be on the radio station. You may have still been locked in the cupboard.
I'm sure the guards would have got me out eventually. So just explain to me then, if we basically set our beliefs at such an early age, that why, that can affect us for the rest of our lives, basically, can't it?
Completely.
And how we live it.
Yeah, completely. And it's environmental, Debbie. So, we grow up in an environment, and whether or not, that environment is productive and secure and safe, or it's unsafe. So I'm thinking about different homes that people are brought up in. It doesn't really matter. We take on information from the outside world, and we then construct a set of beliefs because that's the way that we have to operate. If we don't understand how the world works, we can't operate with it. And some of those belief systems are ineffective because we are so little, we're so young, we don't have a fully completed brain function. So what I mean by that is our brain is still in development. And it only stops developing around about the age of about 14, 15. So if you think at around about the age of 4 or 3 or 2 or even 1, or sometimes some of the stuff even goes back to when we're in the womb. Because whether or not we choose to believe it, and there have been loads of research, that the fetus in the womb picks up information from the outside world and from their mother. So if mother...
I was going to say, that's the epigenetic work, isn't it? Basically from Bruce Lipton. So,
yeah, exactly.
The science is there to support that now.
Correct. And, mother goes through some stuff. She's distressed or upset or fearful or whatever it is. She passes all of those feelings into her baby. Inadvertently, obviously. She's not doing that on purpose, but she's human. She feels things. And obviously the baby will do exactly the same thing. The DNA that's passed down from one generation to the next forms part of us, and that too has an impact in terms of what we choose. Interesting story, and just very, very briefly, I'm going to digress and tell you a story about a client of mine who came to me because she had weight issues, and we discovered that her great-grandparents had been in Auschwitz, and they had experienced starvation. And interestingly enough, in her makeup, there was the sense of she had to eat huge amounts of food because she was scared of starvation. Now, she'd never starved in her life, but her great-grandparents had. Isn't that fascinating?
It is, isn't it?
And so she was abusing food in a chronic way because she was so scared of at some point being away from food, not having enough food. So we have these things that we carry around with us, and not even sometimes ours, that we created, and they limit us. So we can walk around with things like, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to be successful, I'm never going to make it in the world, I'm ugly. I mean, I walked around with that one for a long, long time, because if anybody goes onto my website, you can see the story of my nose. I mean, I have a very big Italian Roman nose, and I walked around with the fact that I was ugly for a long time, and it stopped me from interacting with people. It stopped me from opening myself up to, relationships and friendships, because I thought, well, I'm ugly. Nobody's going to like me because I've got a big nose. And I was teased when I was little as well, so that just reinforced the same situation. I mean, I remember the kids saying to me, how do you get your jumper over your head? Doesn't it get stuck? Because your nose is so big, and you don't need an umbrella because your feet will never get wet.
Kids aren't lovely.
So, we walk around with these things, and they stop us. They stop us from encountering and interfacing and connecting with the world around us, because we prohibit ourselves, we put ourselves in a box. It's kind of like staring at a wall. You've got this beautiful room, and all you're doing is facing the wall, and you just don't realize just how beautiful and how incredible this room is, because you're just looking at the plasterboard and the paint of that wall that you're staring at, and all you have to do is turn around. You have to realize that the limiting beliefs are something that you created when you were really little. The brain wasn't fully formed at that stage. You came to a conclusion which was false and erroneous, And all you have to do is turn around. And the beauty of the room is there. And that shifts people. That suddenly gives people things that they never experienced before.
Oh, lovely. I know from my perspective, from a nutrition perspective, when I'm screening people, the ghosting of the past comes up. So I see the resonance, and I can see the things that are constantly coming through for people and affecting their health. It's always funny when I screen someone, and if they've not been very open, and all I've got is kind of a health picture, and I say, so what's going on with your mother? Mm-hmm. or your sister? And they'll look and they'll go, I had an argument. And they're looking at me as though to go, how did the machine know that? And it's absolutely fascinating because we hold on to it, as you're saying, throughout all our cells.
Yeah, exactly.
So sorry, go on.
And we can, and the interesting part about that is we can let it go. I think that's the key message. And if anybody just takes that key message away with them today, I'd be very, very happy. Is the fact that there is a choice and you can let it go.
So if there is a choice and we can let it go, why do we recreate the same situation over and over again? Why do we have patterns in our lives where, we say, I'm never going to do that again. And, I'm never going to see another man. I'm never going to drink myself into the floor, or smoke 75 cigarettes and eat 50, donuts. And then basically within a week, you're saying almost the same thing again and having the same level of hangover and pain. Yeah. Why do we recreate these things?
Yeah. Because it's automated. It's a habit. When I first started talking, we talked about the roads in the brain, the journey, and the neurological pathways. So that just simply means that individual's gone down the same old road, really. They've just gone down the same road, and that could be one of two things. One is they only think they've got that road, and the other one is that there is an alternative, but for some reason, and this is what we call, I'm going to use some jargon at the moment, it's called secondary gain. For some reason, we're getting something back from that behavior. There's something positive about doing what we're doing, even although it's incredibly negative. There's something that is positive. So that person who's, eaten the 50 donuts, there's possibly a level of comfort, a level of, or a sense of safety when they do that. And that's what we call secondary gain. So even although they know that is incredibly unhealthy for them, that feeling of feeling safe, or that feeling of feeling loved, or that feeling of feeling comforted by these 50 donuts is stronger. And that's why they do it. So there's always an intention, a positive intention, even if the behavior is negative. There is something that we're gaining from doing that. I'll tell you a story. My mom was, my mom's lovely. She really is a beautiful human being, but she's only been that to me in the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, she was a nightmare. She was my worst enemy, a complete nightmare. And I hated everything about her. But she would get sick. She would get these huge migraines while I was growing up. And she would lock herself in her bedroom and close the curtains and switch the lights off, and that was it. Mum was gone for the day. And I'd come home from school and I'd go, oh no, Mum's sick again. And then I would have to cook dinner for Dad and, make sure that we had the food ready. And I'm thinking, I used to absolutely hate her for it. But what she was doing is the migraine that she created, although it was really absolutely true, she did really have a migraine and she was in incredible pain, it gave her an opportunity to shut down, to take a day and to just ignore the family unit and everything else that was going around her. And she needed that. What she hadn't learned was that she could give herself that permission without having the migraine. So that's what she used to do. So we do this, we make ourselves sick, we hurt ourselves in some way because that gain that we're getting, that positive intention that we're getting is so strong that it draws us in. And the only reason for that is that we suddenly realize, we don't realize that there's an alternative. And when we suddenly realize there's an alternative, then we can change those unhealthy habits.
It is interesting why we almost force ourselves into a situation, isn't it, to create a change for ourselves.
Yeah.
And the pain that you know, I know and you know, because you'll see your clients go through it, the pain they put themselves through and torture. Like one of my clients wrote to me just recently and said the absolute torture that they put themselves through before they had this realization. It was almost the tipping point, as Malcolm Gladwell will call it, before they, you know, they're now on this whole roller coaster, which is fascinating, but they had to take themselves through that to get themselves to that point.
Yeah, to reach the other side, absolutely.
Mm.
And sometimes things have to get really, really bad for some of us to make the changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've heard, you know, people get sick, they get cancers and things like that. They put themselves through huge amounts of distress, and then they come out the other side and they're a changed human being. They're no longer the person that they were. Mm-hmm.
Now, can you actually help me understand the quote, which is often used in NLP circles? The map isn't the territory. What does this actually mean?
Okay, so anyone that's ever drawn a map knows that for the individual taking that map on that journey, the map is never what the journey looks like. So if I was to draw a little map of, you know, how to get out of my house and back onto the main high street, it will be probably on a back end of a post-it note with a couple of lines and maybe some circles, yeah? Mm-hmm. But that isn't what that person will experience when they get in their car and they drive down the road. Because the circles are traffic lights or roundabouts. The houses are not depicted on the map. The people crossing the road is not depicted on the map. The dog that's barking in the corner is not depicted on the map. So the map is not the territory. So when we journey down a particular pathway, we've got a map, but it's not the journey that we've taken.
Okay.
So what we do as therapists is we need to explain that to the individual. So for example, memories. Memories are a map. They're not true. They're not real. They change over time, and sometimes they even change so much that they're so far away from the actual truth, it's quite scary. So what tends to happen is we have these beliefs, we have these memories of these events that structure how we treat ourselves and the world around us. And what we do as therapists is we begin to look at that map so that we can then change that in a positive way so that it becomes more like a map that's going to give a good, successful result rather than the map that they've got, which isn't the journey. It's not the territory. It isn't real. You know, I know, I have a memory. I think I know this. I think I have a memory of me sitting on a pavement with my right hand bandaged up because my mother happened to burn it with an iron by mistake. And I have that as a memory. I know I don't have that as a memory. I know it's a photograph. But in my neurology, I think it's a memory. But it isn't. It was a photograph that somebody once showed me. So it's not true. So that's the difference between a map and the territory.
Right. Well, so hi, we're back. And I'm with Elvira today from Emotion NLP. Hello.
Hi, Ted.
And we're talking about NLP today and lots of different other stuff as well, aren't we?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Where this thing's going. It's brilliant. I love it.
So let's start talking about, because before we took a break, we were talking about the map isn't the territory, basically. And I'd like to just cover off the fact that we have models that we tend to communicate through that most people will believe that is their perspective on reality. Do we all have the same models?
No, not at all. No, models are created by our environment and through our experiences and through our belief systems and the programs that we run in our brains and our values, the things that are important to us, like honesty and integrity and generosity and learning and change, whatever those values are. And so what is it? The memories, let me just go through them. There's 5 of them. So the memories that we have of our events that we've experienced in the past, are the things that we've gone through, the values that we have, which are the things that are important to us, the programs that we run, which is the way in which we journey around our brain, the beliefs that we have, so the things that we believe are right or wrong or evil or good or real or not real, and then the attitudes that we have, the things that, the response that we have to certain things. And all of those together, all of those elements together create our reality. So that means that each and every one of us has a completely different reality. Because none of us would have had the same experiences, the same beliefs, the same programs, the same values, the same attitudes. None of us will have had all of those exactly the same. So when we talk about our uniqueness, it's because we are uniquely in charge of our own reality, our own perspective, the way that we operate on this planet. And each and every one of us does that exquisitely, uniquely. So it's amazing how we communicate with one another, Debbie, because your reality is going to be very, very different to my reality. So if I say to you, I'm going home. Home for me is actually a really lovely place. Perhaps home for you isn't such a lovely place. So your construct of the word home is very different to my construct of the word home. And I'm thinking, yeah, she knows what home means, without a complete understanding of what you think home is. We've already started to miscommunicate. We've already begun the miscommunication process just with that one word, because your perception and my perception are different. So it's incredible how we really manage to talk and how we really manage to get our messages across. And most instances, we very seldomly get the message across, very seldomly. And we have no idea of what that person's taken on board. So I know for a fact that when I see a client, I'll be saying loads of stuff and I haven't got a bloody clue as to what they've taken away with them. Not a clue.
So is this where what we say can be taken wrong? So we have one intention behind it and then somebody looks at us and gets really upset and walks off and you think, what did I say?
Yeah, you go, huh?
Huh? It happens all the time to me.
Oh, I tell you. I remember saying to an ex-boyfriend of mine, the reason that he's an ex-boyfriend. Yeah, exactly. I remember saying to him, you have no idea how important you are to me. And he went, what do you mean I have no idea? What do you mean you're questioning my intelligence? What do you mean? He got really upset. And I'm thinking, huh? That wasn't the intention. That wasn't the intention at all. So yeah, absolutely. The words that we use, the messages that we deliver are constructed by the individual receiving that message in a completely different way. So, and we have to check. And in order for us to deliver a message that we want that person to gain, we have to check. We have to check what they've understood from what we've said.
And so basically, your model of the world and my model of the world. And is this where, for instance, when there's an accident and they have, both the witnesses and they get a different, it's often, it can be a completely different accident that people will often refer to.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. When I was at university, I was in the psychology stream, and one of the lessons was exactly that. It's about, perceiving reality. And they had we had huge auditoriums. I'm so sure it's very similar here. And there were about probably 300 people in the room. And they had someone run across at the front of the room, in a sort of like a made up suit. There was a hat and there was a walking stick and stuff like that. And there were different colors. And every single person who saw that person walk across the front of the room came up with a different description, a completely different description. So in my model of that reality, the person was wearing a hat and had a walking stick. I don't know if he was wearing a hat and had a walking stick. Because other people didn't see a hat, and other people didn't see a walking stick, and other people said he was dressed in black, and I'm absolutely clear that I saw purple and yellow. So, everybody's perception of that particular event was different. That's 300 different perceptions.
That's incredible. I remember I was on a training course a few years ago, and you've possibly seen this footage, and other people might have done as well in the audience. And
the ape.
About the gorilla walking across.
Across.
Yeah, you're told to look at those people playing with the ball. So
that's right.
And count the ball and how many bounces it gets, and you don't even notice the gorilla. And then they basically say so, and you're expecting them to say how many times was the ball passed, and you're there with your answer, and they go, so who saw the gorilla? And everyone looks at each other to say, what gorilla?
Yeah, exactly.
There was never a gorilla there, and they show it you again, and there's a gorilla, blatant as anything, walking across. I went and got my eyes tested after that one. I'm joking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're responding all the time to our map of the reality that we've effectively created.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And it ties in with, the most important bits that it ties in with is the set of values that we carry around with us and the set of beliefs that we carry around with us. It's incredibly, incredibly difficult for us to be in a situation where our values are not met. The things that we believe are important to us, if they are not being met, we don't stay. So I left corporate a while ago because I worked for an organization where I was instructed as a manager to keep certain things to myself, and I couldn't share that with my team. And one of my values is honesty, because I believe that people deserve to hear the truth. And I couldn't do that anymore. So I left because it was transgressing one of my deepest values. If you're in a relationship with somebody and honesty being one of my values, if that person lied to me or in some way told me an untruth, I couldn't stay with them. I just couldn't, because the feeling of being let down is just too extreme. So values and beliefs are probably the key, and when they're transgressed in some way, then we can't stay. We tend to then vote with our feet. But our models of our reality are really, really key. So if we enter into a relationship and we don't share those things with each other, we don't say to someone, actually, these are my values. These are the things that are important to me, and they then share theirs equally with you. If you don't know what their values are, you could possibly be transgressing those values too, without even knowing it. And the language that we use, the behaviors that we encounter, the things that we do, the things that we don't do, could be transgressing those values day in and day out, and we're not even aware of it. And getting to understand somebody else's model of the world is key if you want to have a relationship with them, whether that be a business relationship or a friendship or a romantic relationship. It doesn't really matter. If you want to interact with someone at a much deeper level, if you've got to understand what's important to them, that creates the foundation for a really magnificent relationship. Because then you respect each other. You recognize that if they have a value and you don't have the same value, or if you have a value that they don't have, or you have matching values, then you can work them through. You can work through them so that you then get a much, much better result.
And when you understand your values, it really can enable you to make decisions far quicker and stop all the procrastination, can't it?
Completely. And the conflict. When we feel that we're conflicted, when we feel pulled apart, when we've got decisions to make and we go, I don't know if I should do this, or should I do that, or maybe I should do this, or maybe I should do that. And you literally feel like you're in a tug of war. I mean, that is just so disempowering. It takes energy away from you. Whereas if you go back to your values, you go back to your beliefs, you go back to, your model, and you go, okay, this is what's right for me. And that's sometimes really difficult for a lot of people, to do something that is purely and totally, simply right just for them. Because a lot of people will do things for other people when they don't want to. They feel obligated. They feel like they have to. They feel like they're tied. I mean, it's no misnomer that, people call marriage a ball and chain, because you enter into that relationship and then you feel obligated. You feel like you have to do things. And actually, if you just sat down and spoke about your values, that wouldn't be the case. Oh, okay. We can't have a relationship then, It's simple.
That doesn't happen, let's face it. Get swept up in the moment.
Yeah.
So we work with a filtering system.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to, and that works on this unconscious level all the time, doesn't it? Do you want to talk about this filtering system that we tend to go through without even realising it?
Okay. So going back to that analogy that I spoke of earlier, where we're facing the wall of this beautiful room, that's the filtering system. So what happens in our day-to-day environments is we get information in from the outside world through what we see, through what we hear, through what we feel or touch, through what we smell, and through what we taste. So our 5 senses, the normal human 5 senses that we have. Information comes towards us at a rate of 2 million, approximately 2 million bits per second. 2 million bits per second. And I just find that fascinating because I can't even conceptualize that. My brain just doesn't compute. It really doesn't. But every second I'm receiving information at 2 million bits through what I hear, through what I see, through what I touch or feel, through what I taste, and through what I smell. And then what we do is we can't cope. Our brain, our conscious mind can't cope with all of that information. Our unconscious mind can, but consciously the information that we can deal with is about 100 bits. So we get 2 million and we can only really cope with about 100 bits per second. So we get rid of all of the others. We literally delete most of it. We just pretend that it doesn't exist. We ignore it. We distort some of the other pieces of information. So we manipulate that information so that we make it look like something that we know. And then we generalize other bits of information. So, for example, if we're driving down a road, we go, oh, all roads are the same. Actually, they're not. Or perhaps we see someone that looks like someone that we know. If we like that person that we know and that person looks like, then we are more open to that individual. If that individual looks like someone that we know that we don't like, then we operate in a slightly different way because we've distorted it. We've completely distorted it. So there was a woman that I met at networking that honestly, Debbie, she looked like my stepsister. She was the splitting image of my stepsister. I love my stepsister. She's a beautiful woman. I have lots of love for her. So when I met this woman at networking, I had that same attitude towards her. This woman doesn't know me from a bar of soap. And was quite taken aback by my openness. We can do the opposite as well. We can see somebody that we don't like, or it reminds us of somebody that we don't like, and we judge them instantaneously, even although that person could have been our best friend. We just don't give them that opportunity. So that's how the filtering mechanism works. And we end up working with 100 bits of information per second, which is very, very limiting. It's almost like taking a string and looking at that string, which is, I don't know, let's say, for example, it's 1 meter long, and you only focus on half an inch, and that's all you see. And you forget about everything else. And in that moment, you limit yourself. You stop yourself. You don't recognize options. You don't see opportunities. The door could be wide open and you don't see it. It's just not there. The person that I'm with today, my man in my life, David, he worked for me for 5 years, Debs, before we became involved.
It's very tall for you to ignore him. I'll be honest.
But it's just amazing. You just don't see it. It's right there, right in front of your eyes. You just don't see it.
It is fascinating, though, that when it's the whole, you're not interested in in seeing yellow cars, then you get yourself a yellow car and all of a sudden that's all you see on the road, isn't it? But is this information, is this where people, they end up having different parts of them not able to make decisions because different parts are taking in information and realities, and so they get overwhelmed. And this is where they start to, like, I have clients who basically say, well, one side of me wants to do this and the other side says this, and I feel like I'm, this whole tug of war pulling, yourself backwards and forwards. Is this where you can't filter properly, or you're unable to filter, so you're almost receiving too much information and overwhelming yourself? Or is it something different, I suppose, is what I'm asking you.
I mean, it's an interesting concept that you've just given me, because I haven't thought of it that way. But it's not about a non-functioning or a misfunctioning filter system. It's almost like you've literally got different elements of you running at the same time that have different models. So there is, I mean, from traditional psychology perspective, we have a child, an adult, and a parent running all of the time. So we have the child element inside of us, we have a parent element inside of us, and we have an adult element inside of us, and each of them will operate slightly differently. So if you're trying to make a decision between the child and the parent, there's going to be conflict because the models are different. The parent will look at it from one perspective and the child will look at it from another. So if you think about somebody who's trying to give up smoking, the child will go, I want a cigarette. And the parent will go, no, you shouldn't have one because it's unhealthy. And the child goes, but I want a cigarette. And the parent goes, no, you're not having one. You told everyone that you were giving up. And the child goes, but I want a cigarette. So it's that conflict that occurs because they're operating from different viewpoints, from different perspectives.
I'm a bit torn with that because the way I've been trained, not only in the NLP, but also in the nutrition and the naturopathic perspective, is that if someone is on overwhelm and is unable to filter, and so effectively they've got all this information and going over and over and over things, in effect, I would bring that to cellular level and be wondering what's happening with that cellular membrane and the receptors on that membrane to be allowing so much information in and for them not to be able to filter things properly. And for me, I've got, it's like that aspect of it. And then what you've just said is, I suppose I'm trying to work out how it all fits in some respects.
So I think the filtering mechanism that you've just described, when people are being ineffective and they go into a state of overwhelm, I think that absolutely is completely correct, because the hormones in the body are then, overwhelming the cellular structure of the body. Completely get that. So, for example, if we're in a huge state of fear, for example, I mean, the adrenaline and cortisol that are running through the body is extreme, isn't it, Debs? Yeah. So, I mean, that would cause that filtering mechanism to be skewed. Absolutely, completely agree with you. But when we were talking about, or if we were just talking about a healthy human being that isn't in overwhelmed state, that you can have different parts of that individual running at the same time. So I think I was taking it from a perspective of they are in a state of health,
right, and
not in a state of overwhelm. And I think the confusion arose because we were operating from different models.
I'm just trying to understand my two different perspectives that I've been trained in now. And what you've just said, it is interesting, I have to say. Raised some more questions for me. I haven't got to now go back.
I mean, obviously you do a lot of the body stuff, which I don't. So it's interesting to hear that side of it too, which is, always, as you know, fascinating to me.
Now, I love the parts integration side of things, and for the audience out there, I started talking about parts because clients will and people will talk quite naturally about this side of me wants to do this and this side of me wants to do that, and where people can't make decisions, and often you can integrate them together to enable them to work properly. Can you just talk a little bit about doing why you'd want to do that?
Okay.
And how you'd do it?
So parts are created because we separate ourselves into different models. Yeah. So different models of reality. Yeah. So literally what we've been speaking about so far is that we have a particular model depending on our values, our beliefs, our programs, our memories, and our attitudes, and that creates one part. And we may then have another part. So let me use an example because that's always easiest. If we grow up in a very, very strict environment, which is how I grew up, my dad was incredibly strict. I had a part of me that said I had to do things his way so that I could then be acknowledged and accepted, and loved, because that's ultimately what we're seeking as human beings, is to be accepted and loved. So I had to do things his way. But there was another part of me that said I didn't want to do it his way because it recognized that his way was incredibly old-fashioned. Things had moved on. People were doing things differently. And there was another part of me that said, actually, you know what? I want to do it this way. So it creates separation. So the one part wants to do it the way that is being asked, and the other part wants to do it the way that they feel they want to do it, for example. And it almost creates a different personality. And in very severe circumstances, we get the multiple personality disorders, where that person becomes a different person completely. And they could have multiple personalities running depending on what environment, what scenario is playing. And we do this, even healthy people do this to a limited extent, but we still do it, where we operate differently. For example, we would operate differently with our friends, to how we operate at work, to how we operate with our partner, to how we operate with our children, to how we operate with our parents. So we run different parts. It's part of our neurology. It's absolutely and totally normal and healthy, and there's nothing wrong with it. The only time that it causes us distress is when those parts are not working cohesively, when they're not acting as a team, when they're working in a tangential way, that they literally, one's going left and the other one's going right. That's when it causes us distress. The interesting thing about parts integration, when we pull them back together and we reunite them, is that they will always come from the same intention. They will always have the same intention. And that intention is usually something quite high up. And what I mean by that is our intention to be loved, our intention to be peaceful, our intention to be free, our intention to be accepted. Those are what I mean by intention. And all of those parts will always come from the same highest intention. And when you teach them that they have the same highest intention, when, let's say, for example, the left part meets the right part and goes, oh, okay, you just want to be loved. I get that. That's also what I want. Then they can start coming together. They can start to collaborate. They can start to work together. So rather than pulling us apart from ourselves, they then work together. They collaborate. And that's what parts integration is all about. It's a recognition that both elements want exactly the same thing for you. And when that is recognized, when that recognition is in place, the parts come together. They shake hands and go, oh, okay, cool, now let's work together. Because both elements are very, very important. Both can see things in a slightly different way. Both have different perceptions. And both have value. So working together gives you the best result. And when you let go of that conflict, when the two meet in the middle, then the results are brilliant.
Mm. And that's what I find, actually, when I do parts integration, it can just change everything so quickly for the individual.
Absolutely.
Absolutely amazing. Now, the chat box, I'm just going to have a quick chat to them. God, copyright, trademark, behave yourself. All right. I'll be honest. And what else are you all saying? You're all talking about language and about speaking Klingon. And I'm not even going to mention what else that you're saying, but you all need to behave yourselves in that chat box. Thank you very much. And I can't believe you, God. I would have expected a higher level, if I'm honest. Thank you very much. Right. So it's interesting that you say about multiple personalities, because I read research back when I started training about how multiple personalities can actually have different health. So
yeah,
they
also
can have different.
yeah, different allergies, different sensitivities to food. You know, like one's allergic to shellfish and the other one isn't.
And I read research where there was one lady, she had a number of personalities, and her eye colour would change with certain personalities. And it was documented. It was just astonishing.
Oh, isn't it? What the brain can do.
Yeah, yeah. Now, they're all talking about language in the chat box, and so I'm particularly Klingon for some reason.
Okay, were we speaking Klingon? I wasn't aware.
It doesn't seem to matter, honestly. But let's talk about language, since it's been brought up. It's really important in NLP, isn't it? And it can, about how it can influence and give indications of what's actually going on for the person. Do you want to actually just talk a little bit more about how you would listen to someone and what they say, how you can take from that, not only the language, but also the the non-verbal cues as well?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to mention, Debbie. Language isn't about only about the words that we use, the stuff that comes out of our mouth. It's everything else. It's 93% everything else. Isn't that huge? So it's only 7% of the words that we use. 93% is everything else. And what I mean by everything else is that it's the non-verbal stuff that we do. So our hand gestures, how we use our facial expressions, our body posture, how we sit, how we stand, the tilt of our head, the tiny muscle movements around the eyes and the jawline especially, the flushing of the skin, often around the chest area, around the hands, sometimes around the feet, our twitches, so the foot tapping or the hand tapping, holding our chin, for example, crossing our arms, a whole bunch of stuff. And as I said, 93% of it is the nonverbal stuff. So when I'm working with a client, I will listen to the words that they use, obviously, but I will be even more attentive to what they're doing with their body, because it's what they're doing with their body that I'm interested in. And the reason that I'm interested in that is that obviously we can very easily use the words in a particular way. So we choose the words that we want to use, and if we're very careful, we can create certain sentence structures and tell people what we think they want to hear. But the body never lies. And if you watch the body will give you an indication of whether the words that they are using and what they truly, truly feel or believe or think is aligned. And often it is, and often it isn't. So, for example, if I went up to somebody and I shook their hand and I actually looked the other way and I didn't look at them while I was shaking their hand, the person receiving that handshake may absolutely recognize that I'm not really interested in shaking their hand. I'm not really interested in them because I haven't bothered to look at them. Yeah? If on the other hand I shake their hand and I look at them and I greet them, then the information that they're getting from my body is completely different to what I was saying. So just by turning away while you're saying, pleased to meet you, you've got two totally different results. Two totally different ones. One by looking at the person in the eye and going, pleased to meet you, and the other one by looking away, shaking the hand and going, pleased to meet you. And I'm sure a lot of us have experienced that. So from a language perspective, the non-verbal cues are even more important than what people are saying. However, the language is also really important. So we often use things like always and never. These are called generalizations. And I've often had clients who go, he always treats me badly. And I'm thinking, really? Always? He always, so forever and ever and ever and ever, he's always treated you badly. And you kind of start to play with the language that people are using. so that they can suddenly realize that the language that they're using is possibly not really the truth or the reality of things. And in that moment, we start to unravel this very, very tightly wound up ball of wool that's called their reality. We start to loosen it up. We start to make them realize that things aren't necessarily as they believe that they are. And that's the power of the language element of NLP. It's literally loosening up that model of that reality that that person is using at that time, which is ineffective. And if they begun to recognize that ineffectiveness of their model and started to shift it, the results would then be different.
So in effect, when someone naturally feels ill at ease with someone, and yet the individual in front of them may be being really nice and be offering them the world, in effect, you really should be going with your gut instinct, because you're reading the non-verbal cues, aren't you?
Completely. You know, the gut mind, the intuitive element of us is our unconscious. It's the one that's storing and taking on those 2 million bits of information per second. Why should we not trust it? How can we not trust it? From a completely scientific perspective, if somebody said to me, this box over here has got 2 million bits of information per second in it, and this box has only got 100, this one, why would you choose the one that's got 100 bits of information in it? Why wouldn't you choose the one that's got more information in it? Why wouldn't you trust your unconscious, your gut reaction? Now, when I used to travel up to Heathrow every day, because I worked at British Airways for quite a long time, I did the journey up from Fleet up to Heathrow on the M3 every day almost. I knew when I shouldn't get on the road. I knew when I shouldn't get on the M3. And if I ignored that gut feeling, I got stuck in traffic. I just did. I thought, A30 or M3? I'd go M3, fantastic. If I ignored that and went A30 or M3, you should go to A30, now I'll go to M3 instead. Got stuck in traffic. Because the unconscious is taking information in at a huge rate, and it knows stuff that you are not consciously aware of. So if you meet someone and you go, you know what, I don't like this, then for goodness sakes, get the hell out of there.
It is interesting that, because a few years ago when I worked in my corporate job, I set off and I checked the weather, and it was winter, and I've got a 4x4, so I packed it full of stuff in case I got snowed in, and I set off for a meeting, and as always, in heels and a dress, looking fantastic as you can imagine, and in the middle of winter, and I was about to go onto the dual carriageway, so I was about 3/4 of the way there, and my gut was telling me that I needed to stop and turn around and go back, and I carried on. And within 5 minutes, I was snowed in, along with about 40 other people, watching a HGV go backwards down this dual carriageway in front of us. And I dug myself out, because in heels and a dress, I'll be honest, watching, and whilst lots of other people were looking at me, but because I had all, basically a shovel and everything, and stuff to actually put under the tyres to get myself out again. And it was quite funny, because the police came down one by one and were saying, do you need any help? Took one look and said, you're fine. And I said,
fine.
I think if you're going to save people, well, I'd like to be part of the women and children first, if you don't mind. But at that point, I really wished that I'd gone with my intuition. But it is absolutely fascinating, because when you think about our society now, we go to experts, we ignore our body signs continuously. And I part of my role is to get people back in touch with their body and intuitively know what it's telling them. I know that once my clients can do that, they don't really need me anymore. And this is why I can normally say, you'll be seeing me for a maximum of 6 sessions, because actually once you get in touch with your body tells you everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. When I learned that, when I suddenly realized, actually, you know what? There's something inside of me that's much more intelligent and much, much cleverer than I could possibly even imagine, then things just became easier. Because if I've got a headache, I know something's not right. I know that I need to be looking at something. I know that I'm resisting something. I know that I'm putting pressure on myself in some way. So I can sit down with myself and have a conversation and go, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, you got a headache. Fantastic. Now use that information. You know, if I've got a sore throat, I absolutely know I've either said something I shouldn't have said or I haven't said something I should have said. Absolutely instantaneously. I know that. Completely and totally. And when you get those signals from the body, when you realize that actually, you know what, this is an intelligence that you can't even understand, why wouldn't you listen to it? Why wouldn't you? Why would you choose to ignore it? And unfortunately, we teach our children to ignore their gut instincts. We teach them to ignore it. Because if you look at kids, everything operates from a gut instinct perspective. Everything operates completely unconsciously. And then they go through the education system and they're told, oh, no, you can't be seeing auras. You can't be seeing colors around people. That's not right. You know, you've got to draw mummy and daddy in black pen, not blue and green. The kid sees mummy and daddy as blue and green because that's what the kid sees. And you know, that suddenly all of those things that we have, those huge talents and skills that we have get squashed because it's not right, because it's not acceptable, because it's somehow scary, you know. And we dumb ourselves down. And I often say to my clients in exactly the same way that you do, all I do is raise your level of awareness. That's all I do. I just simply increase your level of awareness so that you can live the life that you want to live. So that you're not disempowered. You don't feel like something else is controlling you. You take charge. So you listen. You watch. You observe. You notice. You become aware. And then when you do those things, life just gets easier. It just does.
It also removes the need to go to others and that controlling aspect that other people can have over you as well, from my perspective, because I'm going to come back to science. You know, people go to their doctor or they read this often very biased and skewed research, and then they're constantly confused. So they go to an expert and they believe what they're told, and actually rather than looking at their own body, I have clients who won't listen to me but will will actually look at what's on the my screening machine, and will go with that over what is actually happening with their body. And I just recently had a really interesting experience with a client who I asked them what were the symptoms of what they were experiencing, and they told me what the doctors had told them that they had. So they told me all the labels. So I let them go through the story. And then I effectively said, I come back to my original question, how are you experiencing the illness?
Yeah.
And it was almost like their experience wasn't important. It was actually what the experts had told them about what had happened, which was more important. And I think, I truly believe that when you can get back to that gut mind and you truly understand and listen to yourself, the control of others it just disappears over you.
It's minimized. I mean, you can certainly use information that other people are giving you, but then you can check it with yourself and go, is this true? Is this valid for me? Does this make sense? Is it real? Do I take it on board and do something about it, or do I let it go because it doesn't fit? And that's brilliant, because if you ever criticized or you've ever given some feedback, then you can go, okay, is this feedback valid? You know, do I want to take it on board? Do I need to do something about it, or do I let it go? Because you check internally and you go, okay, that's their perception of the world. Fantastic. Is it valid? And do I need to do something about it? If it is valid and they've got a point and you can see where they're coming from and it makes sense and it's real for you and your gut feel is giving you all of the ticks in the box, and you do something about it. And, that is about being empowered to make the decisions that you need to make.
There's some fantastic books out there about this, isn't there? Because there's Louisa Hay's work, which really does explain to you when different parts of your bodies are ill, the message that it's giving you. And then I've got a book that I've just dragged out from my own bookshelf here, which is Your Body Speaks Your Mind by Debbie Shapiro. And, that's very much in the same line as Louisa Hay work. And it really does. If you are holding an illness, and like you're saying, if you've got a sore throat, it's about what's it saying to you? Yeah,
exactly. And I think all of those books need to be taken with a certain pinch of skepticism, because, I often say to my client, learn what your body is telling you.
Yeah.
Don't read what somebody else thinks it should be telling you. Yeah, you can use that as information. You can go, oh, okay, the pelvis means this and the knee means that, but what does it mean for you?
Yeah.
Because each and every one of us is different. So even if Louise Hay says, the knees, if you've got problems with your knees, it means X, it might not be that for everyone.
Yeah.
It might not. It could be, but it might not. So it's kind of like, read the books, absorb the information, and then work through it for yourself, because each and every one of us is completely unique.
And that comes back to the reality of the world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If a sore throat for you might be something completely different to what it is for me. And it might be the same, but it might be something completely different. I have just learned that if I get a sore throat, I absolutely know I've done something in some way, said something in some way that I shouldn't have said or should have said. And then as soon as I repair that, fix that, the sore throat goes away.
Now, Gary from Scottish Sovereign is saying, does NLP work on folks who have a good grasp of the use of language?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because they're even more in tune with it, which is fabulous. It's wonderful to work with people who've already got some of that stuff. It's brilliant. Because it isn't about, catching them out or manipulating them in some. It's just literally about making them recognize the model of their world. That's all it is. It's a level of awareness. You increase the level of awareness. You use a bunch of tools. You pick up the right tool for the right intervention, and you change the model. And you do that with their explicit permission to do that. And then you check. You check the results. If the results are giving them better, if the results are better, if the results that are getting are better, fantastic. If they're still a bit squiffy, that's a South African word, I think. They're not quite right. If they're still a bit squiffy, then maybe there's some more work that needs to be done. But we always look at the results. So the key in everything that we do is look at the results in your life. Are you happy with them? If you're happy with them, fabulous. Spot on. Excellent. Continue to do what you're doing. If there's some areas in your life that you're not happy with, the results that you're getting in some of those areas of your life are causing you distress or trauma or in some way upsetting you, then for goodness sakes do something about it, because you don't have to live like that. You really don't. You can choose to change it.
And I'm just going to also come in on what Gary said there, because I remember, and I think I've said to Elvira about this, I remember a few years ago going to a seminar, and it was a 3-day seminar, and on the first day they basically put anchors all the way through it, and they embedded commands all the way through the first day, to the point where I was really getting quite fed up about it. And then I did a reframe, and in effect saw that I could potentially learn from how this individual had actually embedded all these commands. But they embedded them so that people bought at the end of this seminar, and it really did work. I have to say, you saw people run into the back of this seminar to buy as fast as they could, and it was fascinating. But the more aware you are of what's happening, the more aware you are of NLP, the more you can actually see this for yourself. And therefore you're not as, you're not likely to be programmed, for want of a better word, or be taken in by it as easily. So it's worth learning.
Absolutely, it's worth learning, and it's absolutely worth raising your level of awareness, because even although you recognize it as anchors and as embedded commands, Debbie, most people wouldn't. But if they reflected on their gut, on their intuitive self, on their wiser, unconscious mind, they would not be running to the back of the room.
Yeah.
That it's just simply about recognizing that you're intelligent. You've got this wealth of experience and knowledge called the unconscious mind, who's incredibly wise, who's got all of the information that you're ever going to need. All you need to do is listen to it. And NLP is just a set of tools. It really is. It's kind of like, you know, you got to drill because you need to make a hole. And that's it. That's all it is. But I can't drill into your wall unless you give me permission to. And you're going to need to want a hole. Because if you don't need a hole, I ain't going to put one there. So I think a lot of what we are discovering as a human force on this planet at this moment, I think, you know, NLP, you know, Reiki, energy healing, you know, the stuff that you do, Debs, you know, the theta stuff, the psyche stuff, all of that, to me, is just a methodology or a model that raises people's level of awareness to make them recognize that they are incredible human beings in their own right. And I fundamentally believe that. When someone comes to see me, I absolutely and totally believe they have the answers to everything that they need answers to. And all I do is help them to get there. All I do is facilitate those answers bubbling up so that then they then have a different reality, a different perception. And NLP is just one of those tools, and there's millions of them out there. Every day there's a new one. So it's just a recognition that we are moving. Our consciousness is increasing. Our level of awareness is widening. We're starting to realize that we are incredible human beings, and we want to stop being suppressed. We want to stop being controlled. We want to access that part of us that is incredibly, incredibly wise. And I think whatever road you take, whether it's NLP, whether it's psyche, theta, reflexology, whatever it is, if you're raising your level of awareness, you're becoming in touch with who you are, you're recognizing your value on this planet, then that's it. That's it.
I don't think I have anything else to add. Blimey. That was lovely. Well, it's been lovely interviewing you. So can you tell everybody how to get in contact with you if they want to? So things like your website, an email address, that sort of thing, so that people can get in contact.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was a bit confused there for a moment.
That's okay.
What else would you like me to tell you? Yeah, the website is www.e-motionnlp.com. So that's e-motionnlp.com. There's several videos on there. There's a couple of blogs on there that people might find interesting. My email address is Elvira, so that's spelled ELVIRA at e-motionnlp.com. But that would be on the website anyway. And yeah, it would be fantastic if people want to email me. I'd love to hear about what people thought about what we spoke about today. And if there's anything that I can help with, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Fantastic. What a fantastic interview.
Oh, thank you,
very,
Debbie.
very much.
You're very welcome.
I cannot believe we've managed to talk for 2 hours, honestly.
What do you mean? I mean, we've spoken for 6 before without a break. At least we had a break.
I was being ironic. And Elle workshops over in Hampshire as well, which are fantastic. So you have the opportunity to spend some time with her if you want, because they are very, very good. And you linked up just recently with another practitioner and Christine on some interesting information. Christine Chocklin, who was on, I think, with Royston a few months back. So some people may know her as well. So that's been around, hasn't it? If you want to hook up with her, please do. Right, that's me for this week.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to you for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
You're very welcome. And we have to thank Bitchin' Bob
Yeah.
This week. And, Bitchin's doing loads of things behind the scene for me, I have to say. And today he said, can you mention Shazis? Absolutely right. How could I forget Shazis with his Tesla coils coming up next? And I think that the Pet Shop Boys are going to be coming up before him. So don't miss Shazis. We all know it's a dancing around the living room moment, and he will blow up somebody's microwave probably from what I can work out. Honestly. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Debbie. You take care. Love you lots.
Thank you. Bye-bye.